Okay, welcome everybody. Almost everyone's in now. There's a few more just joining us. So welcome to the EOcafe, where the EO community meet. Today we're going to talk about Earth observation and environmental social governance, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. Before we get going, just a reminder of the rules of the EOcafe. Please, you're very welcome to keep your cameras on, but please keep your microphones off unless I specifically ask you to join the conversation. The chat is there, and you can put questions into the chat. In fact, please do put questions into the chat, but you can also use it to share information if you wish. And then well, let's get going. There is a recording going on, but EFRAG, which was previously known as the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, is an independent body bringing together various stakeholders, mainly at European level, but also at national and regional levels. Now, we're talking about ESG, environmental reporting and management. And ESG is it's a criteria used to evaluate a company's impact on the environment, its relationship with stakeholders, and its governance practices. And it's used by authorities and investors alike to understand where the company is going and how it's performing. Now, EFRAG was formed in 2001 in order to advise the Commission on changes to accounting standards, IFRS accounting standards. But it's evolved over the years and is now very much focused on advising the EC on this question of ESG reporting and overall on the European sustainability reporting standards. So we're going to hear about that today, hear more about what it means and how Earth observation can contribute to companies reporting against these criteria. So to tell us about ESRS and how EO can support companies, I'm very pleased that we're joined today by Pedro Faria, who is the environmental leader at EFRAG. And Pedro, you've had quite a difficult afternoon or hectic afternoon, but please, maybe you could just say a few words about yourself and what how you working for EFRAG, and just introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all. Thank you for inviting EFRAG to speak to this community. So I'm Pedro. I'm an environmental engineer by background. Been working now for 25 years. Been with EFRAG for 2.5. Sometimes it looks like 10 years, but it's just 2.5. Previous to that, I work 14 years for CDP as an environmental NGO that was collecting environmental information. Namely, it was very famous for its climate change questionnaire on behalf of institutional investors. So I worked for CDP first as technical director for 10 years, developing the questionnaires, the ratings, kind of also overseeing the data, and then later on as a strategic advisor. I have considerable work now through the years related to sustainability standards and standard setting for sustainability and corporate greenhouse gas accounting. But yeah, I mean, my background is environmental management, very linked to water, waste, pollution, all that stuff. And I also had courses on GIS and that type of thing. And I have to say that, speaking of space imagery, I always think of my father, who was an architect responsible for the planning of um, the Portuguese region, of the center region. And I remember very well his posts with Landsat images and the PostSat images, and how fascinated it always was by cartography
Yeah.
and all these geographical elements that, in particular, Earth observation you could see from space. So it's a fascinating topic, extremely useful as a basic input for everything you do in terms of land planning and environmental management. So I'm very excited to be here talking with you, uh, also because I see there are loads of things that the corporate community should be using, maybe your tools and your solutions. So very happy to discuss those with you.
We'll have a discussion about what can be done, and hopefully an exchange on what we can do and offer as we go on. So we've talked about ESG. The framework has become well, it was originally set up as a voluntary framework for companies to use to report on, and for many companies it still is a voluntary framework, and it allows investors and citizens to understand how the companies fare on environmental and social issues. But the EU took this a step further in 2022 by adopting the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the CSRD, which makes ESG reporting mandatory for companies above a certain size. And I should have looked this up. What size is the mandatory?
Well, right now there are different sizes circulating, but I
Okay.
would say more than 1,000 employees to simplify that.
Okay.
And yeah, it's one, as you're probably aware, um, the EC is going now through this omnibus process,
Mm.
seeking to both amend the directive in terms of the application of CSRD to companies, as well as mandating EFRAG to simplify the reporting standards. And
Okay.
that's actually
It
why
just,
we are so busy right now,
but it's
because
not just publicly quoted companies. It's private companies as well, or um,
there were different waves of reporting, and we started with certain types, mainly the big listed companies.
mm,
But yeah, I mean, all that is moving, but it applied also to private companies
okay.
if they met the thresholds, which were on employees and revenues.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, So the reporting, obviously, they report both on their impact on the environment and on people, but also how social and environmental issues affect them. So it's sort of a two-way process, and how that determines risk. So if there's a risk for the company associated with their environmental actions. Um, so EFRAG has been advising the Commission in this, and particularly in relation to the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. So maybe it would be a good idea just to understand a little bit about EFRAG. Pedro, perhaps you can tell everyone about what the role of EFRAG is, how it's set up, etc.
Yes, so maybe I can start by uh, well, the elevator pitch, which is EFRAG, and what is EFRAG and its mission. EFRAG is the European voice on corporate reporting. And so that means that we actually work not only on sustainability, but we were created to advise the European Commission on corporate financial reporting. And we have been doing that for over 20 years, and that was our initial mandate.
Yeah,
And in that sense, we are a very strange organization because we are clearly in let's say that this ecosystem of European Commission organizations supporting the European Commission work, but we are an NGO. We are an NGO of accountants. Again, something that is a bit weird, yeah.
Mhm.
And a few years ago, in 2021, we were given the mandate to not only advise the European Commission in terms of the financial reporting standards, but also to provide technical advice in the form of draft standards on sustainability reporting. And that's what we have been doing. For that, we created another, let's say, branch of EFRAG, which was previously only focused on financial reporting. But following the due process of uh, of 20 years for financial reporting, we created a new board, a new technical expert group, and in practice also a new team focusing on the sustainability reporting standards. Now, there is a major difference here, which is the financial reporting standards was basically our colleagues engaging with the IFRS Foundation and providing the European voice into that process. In the case of sustainability reporting, there's also now the ISP, which is the branch of IFRS that looks at sustainability reporting.
Mhm.
And we are also providing our European voice there. But Europe has decided to take a distinct approach from the International Sustainability Standards Board. We decided to go for so-called double materiality lens. This means that we care not only about the financial risks and opportunities, but we care also about the impacts of the companies on the environment. This
Mm.
so-called inside out and outside in out view. So it's about what is happening that may affect the company, financial risk, but is also what the company does that impacts what is outside of the company. So environmental impacts, social impacts, that type of things.
Okay.
And that's why we actually have a different set of standards um, that were produced almost at the same time of the ISP standards and that are largely interoperable with them, but have this double materiality lens perspective, which is distinct. Um,
And your members, your governance are collective bodies mainly, I think. We're looking at the background of EFRAG, but a little hard to decipher with many acronyms.
our governance is once again a special animal. We have admin board that takes care of admin issues and, of course, uh, budget issues. And then we have a board for financial reporting and a board for sustainability reporting. I'm going to focus on the sustainability reporting now.
Yeah.
In the sustainability reporting board is constituted by representatives from the national standard setting organizations,
Okay.
the ones responsible, let's say, for the national accounts that now also incorporate sustainability, and that typically were represented by business and accountants, accountant associations. But now, because of sustainability, they need to incorporate also elements of civil society. That is something actually quite interesting. Maybe we should have always had more civil society also in terms of the financial accounting standards. If anybody is able to understand that, that is not an accountant, but anyway. Um, and yeah, so we have national standard setters, we have the auditors, we have preparers, and we have civil society representatives in the Sustainability Reporting Board. We also have these representatives at the level of the admin board, and again at the level of the technical expert group.
Okay.
Um,
So, I mean, I think our main interest is around the environmental the E of ESG, although maybe there are some aspects of S&G, but we'll talk about that later. And I've noted that within the standards, there are 12 standards which were developed across the three different topics. And there are 5 key areas under the environment. So climate, pollution, water and marine resources, biodiversity and ecosystems, and resource use. And somewhere around all that is the notion of the circular economy. So what is required from companies in terms of their environmental reporting?
So 12 standards, as you mentioned. We have 2 that are generic, one that sets the principles, and the other that sets minimum disclosure requirements and the key areas. So these are the ESRS 1 on the principles, ESRS 2 on the minimum requirements or overall requirements. And companies have a structure that they have to report in accordance with these 2 standards. So they have to disclose their impacts, risks, and opportunities, and their relationship with the business model. This is done in the so-called sustainable business model disclosures. They have to report on the process that they follow in order to establish what is material or not. This is so-called IRO 1 impacts, risks, and opportunities process. And then they have to disclose on policies, actions. So the policies and actions that they have or to manage sustainability matters that are material for them. What are these sustainability matters? Well, they are the topics that are, in the case of the environment, 5 key topics, which correspond to the 5 standards: climate, pollution, water and marine resources, biodiversity, ecosystems, and circular economy. But then also, subtopics and subtopics. So, for example, on climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, energy; on pollution to air, pollution to water, substance of concern, so forth. So for each of the subtopics or the companies have to report certain information or information that pertains to those sustainability matters. Sorry. They may have to disclose one policy, which is the environmental policy, and explain, my environmental policy that does this and that applies and addresses my sustainability matters related with climate, with circular economy, and biodiversity and ecosystems. So, for example, I like this example very much. Inditex has a strategic policy related with the sourcing of the fiber, and namely with requiring more secondary or recycled fiber in the use of their products, that addresses both climate change, biodiversity, and circular economy. So one policy addresses all those sustainability matters. They have to disclose the policies, and then they have to disclose the actions that they are making to support the policies. So they may say we are engaging with our supply chain in order to have more collection of, used clothes, and with other companies in the supply chain to make sure that that is then transformed into fiber that can go into other producers in the value chain that then supply to us. That type of thing. So companies have to report the actions as well as the resources that they are dedicating to those actions. These resources may need to be quantified in terms of CapEx and OpEx. So, you know, um, they may be an energy company and saying, we are investing in renewable energy. We plan to invest this amount, millions, in building renewable energy capacity in the next 5 years.
Mhm.
Then they also have to report on targets. And again, there is minimum disclosure requirements for targets. Targets typically will have a base year, base values, and target year and target values, and may link to the actions or may link to the metrics. So they may say, express a target that says, we are going to build this amount of capacity in terms of renewable energy, or they may express the target in terms, this is the scope 2 reduction that we plan to achieve in the next 5 to 10 years.
Or reduction, maybe.
And
Reduction in emissions, maybe.
reduction in emissions, yeah.
Mm.
So policies, actions, and targets, and then metrics. And the metrics is really then what differs from each standard. On GHG, the key metrics are energy, our GHG emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3, carbon credits, carbon pricing, and then there is another set of metrics. I'll go there in a minute. On pollution, we have the amount, the flow of pollutants, substance of concern, substance of very high concern, and microplastics. On water, we have water consumption, water withdrawals, water discharges from the point of view of volumes, not quality, to the environment. On biodiversity, we have metrics related with drivers of ecosystems impact. So things like land use change or invasive species, but we also have metrics that are connected with impacts on ecosystems and impacts on the state of species. Now, these are very generic metrics. They are more like indicator placeholders where companies can then place their own metrics. Sorry, you were going to say something. No?
Yeah, no, I was simply going to develop it in terms of the targets are not just related, or are they just related to regulatory matters, or they will be set by the company themselves in terms of things which are important to their business practice.
Very important. This is a transparency framework. So you report what you have. You are not required to have targets. You are not required to have actions. You are not required to have policies. You report if you have them. If you don't have them, let's say at least the current standards also require you to report that you don't have them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really focused on transparency. It's not focused on requiring anything from companies besides reporting. So like you don't need to be a good student. You just need to be transparent on the marks you have.
Okay, but if a company, an energy company, is emitting, they're using cooling water, they're emitting certain volumes of cooling water. I'm not sure this is a good example actually when I've come to it, but in terms, so a regulation that exists that controls, they would be expected to recognize that regulation and state whether they're doing something or not. Would that be?
Not necessarily,
Not
no,
necessarily.
not necessarily.
Okay.
Because there is regulation in the European space for almost everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, the report would be useless if they have to report on everything that they are doing because of regulation.
Mhm.
What would be the angle is if the regulation is creating a risk linked to, for example, the discharges that they are making, and if that risk is material, then they could have to report that risk and what they are doing in order to make sure that, for example, they don't have a big fine or that they don't lose their license to operate.
Yeah, yeah.
This would be the type of thing.
Okay. So they're they're required to produce the report if they have a certain if they meet the certain criteria of a certain size. That includes reporting on environmental measures. Um, the interest from everyone here today is what Earth observation can do to contribute to that. Can you perhaps elaborate a little bit your views, which I think are developing, on how Earth observation can support environmental reporting?
Yes. So this is corporate reporting. And I have to say now, I'm going to change here a little bit to the environmentalist in me. But the real important thing on corporate reporting, it's not that they comply with an obligation of reporting. That in itself, I have to say, is kind of useless. But corporate reporting drives something. Drives something on two sides, let's say. One is the company side. It should drive the company to systematically interrogate what am I doing that impacts the environment and that may impact me afterwards. And that will then require them, if they are smart, to manage those really important things. So in a way, corporate reporting is a driver, and I know that as a fact, as I've seen that for 14 years at CDP, is a driver of good environmental management and even strategic change management in companies.
Mm.
On the other hand, also corporate reporting is used by other stakeholders, NGOs, for example, or investors to well, to monitor what is happening to companies at a different level and from a different perspective. Um, so it's the user's aspect. And that user aspect, they use that information also to drive a certain change, I would say, more at system level. So, for example, when NGOs made reporting so common, so in a way, such a norm, then it became a law, which is what is happening now. Um, but let's start with internal perspective. Reporting drives good environmental management. In this good environmental management, when you are talking at corporate level, you are talking of companies that have assets sometimes all over the world. And
Yeah.
these companies, European and global companies that operate in Europe, they have operation assets all over the world. Sometimes these operation assets are very tiny things. They are points in a map. They might be vessels going around in the oceans or airplanes going around through the skies. They may be roads. So they may be points going, they may be lines, they may be huge portions of land or huge portions of territories from which they source materials. There's ample scope for imagery to support the environmental management of corporates. Give some examples. Potentially, one of the most common is methane monitoring. So methane monitoring throughout the years have been done at the sources with all sorts of limitations. Nowadays, you're probably very well aware through those sensors that we have been able to put into satellites, we are already able to do quantification of methane emissions from space. This quantification is revealing itself very robust, both from the point of view of allowing a reporting that is much more precise and timely, but most important is allowing to spot where companies have real problems, be it in a pipeline that can cross tens of thousands of kilometers, being it in an operation area, wells, where you may have big fugitive emissions and that type of thing that previously were very hard to spot. Other examples may be less intuitive. If we talk, for example, water management companies. Now, we know that water management companies and some of the big European ones and even global ones will have to report under the ESRS. I think, last week with them in Porto, discussing some of these issues. But we also know that their main issue is losses, water losses, again, in their networks, and particular in the high pressure side of their networks, but also in the low. I aware of a use case where through very intelligent algorithms that is overlaying their networks with what is happening in the landscape, namely vegetation growth, they have been able to say, oh, these trees here where it passes your pipelines are particularly green during, I don't know, the summer season. This is highly suspicious. Please dig there or put there your pipe drones because there may be a leakage. And with that, they are getting a much more accurate list of where they need to intervene to stop leakages. Again, from the point of view of transportation systems and managing multiple assets going around, the geospatial information plays a critical role. From the point of view of identifying assets. Now, more on the user side, we have the financial system saying, you corporates, you need to report where your critical assets are, and you need to say which ones are at physical risk of climate change, from climate change. Now, there's been a huge conversation on asset level data. We have databases on asset level data, but actually you are able to identify key assets by looking at images from the space. You are able to see there's this factory there, there's this power station, and you are able also to link that to geographic information in the ground to see if they are in flood sensitive areas. You are able to link that with other information, and voila, you have an extremely important use case that maybe investors should be using and banks, instead of requiring companies to report this type of information in their annual sustainability reports, which will make them extremely heavy and burdensome. Going back,
do you have some form of advisory or best practice role? I'm thinking, we have these individual examples, and we should hear of some more in a moment. But how can we increase the awareness of the applicability of the technology to environmental reporting?
I don't know. We are too busy right now, but I think through the compilation of case studies, it would be a great piece of work that we would be very happy to do with you in terms of saying, look, we know that you have to report all of these. We know that this is all very painful for you, but actually, this is not about the pain of reporting. This is about the benefits that you can have from making this introspection in the company. And there are all these tools out there that you may not even be aware that can help you and that can bring you massive amounts of opportunities and cost reductions. But I wanted to talk one
Okay.
opportunities, or let's say managing risk, and talking about something that affected me like 3 weeks ago, which was when the Iberian grid shut down. And, still not very clear why that happened, but it seems that may have played a very important role. The fact that we now have massive amounts of solar, we have these super big solar plants, and that the they are very sensitive to the amount of cloud coverage.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise, something we knew. But what we didn't knew is that cloud coverage, which can change very rapidly, and we still don't have, as far as I'm aware, very good ways of predicting it in short time frames. So they can really impact the amount of power that is being delivered by these mega stations into a grid that at certain times is highly dependent on this source. And while, for example, we have been able to sort that out for wind power, a former colleague of mine have made algorithms that are able to estimate the wind in the next minute, and that allows the grid to manage the green power inputs into the grid very effectively. This doesn't happen for cloud coverage. And how do you monitor cloud coverage better? I think through satellite. It will have to be a very, on demand on right now what is happening. But I think this will be a very important area. And actually, I just saw last week that there was a PhD on modeling cloud coverage in one of our top universities. So, uh, you know, the amount of things that we can do to help with Earth or observations is just dependent on our imagination to identify the case, the use cases, and then being ingenious enough to find solutions through geospatial data.
We'd certainly be very happy to work in more detail with you to develop our understanding. I'd like to try and bring one or two other people into the conversation. We've got some questions, but in preparing this EOcafe, we had a discussion, and you were interested to hear of examples from sort of the service provider side where there was some links to ESG reporting. So we did invite contributions. We only had one response to that, which was from Anthony Gravelin, who is CEO of Designtech. And Anthony is with us. So Anthony, do you want to just say a little bit about what you're doing? You're muted, I think.
No, unfortunately, it's not, Anthony, you're not being muted, but we cannot hear you. So it has to be a technical issue on your side.
Whilst you're trying to work that out, pick up which microphone is active. Maybe I'll take the first question in the chat, which comes from Flavia de Souza Mendes. Flavia, please, you with us?
Hi everyone, I hope that you can hear me. Let me just turn on my camera here. So my question is around like the real use on remote sensing in these applications and so on. I think It's very complicated. I have been talking to many consulting firms, and they still don't see a justification to use this Earth observation data, right? Because geolocation is encouraged, for example, under CSRD, but it's not mandatory. So as a result, of course, companies can rely on estimated, let's say, with minimal spatial evidence and still remain, for example, fully compliant, right? So, and I think some companies, they have a little internal justification to allocate budget, for example, for Earth observation and other spatial tools, if this is not really clear in the regulation, like such as the UDR, where you have really to have the GPS points, and you really have to have a map of deforestation and so on. So how can we truly make this more operational, and how can these regulations truly adopt Earth observation? Because again, company has no justification under these regulations to secure some budget for these things, right? And there's technical capability for every part of the CSRD and other regulations. It's done already. There are many service providers here that can give a very good results on each one of these requirements, but still, I see that even basic data they are not using.
Well, there is one thing that I think it's very important to realize. Companies are used to report on the data they have internally. And they are not scientists. They want to manage things. So, going and saying, well, we have all these data and companies should just reflect on this will not fly. And you need to provide tools that address concrete management issues that companies may have. Some of these companies don't even know that they have these issues, or sometimes they don't know that geospatial data can be useful for them, like the case of the water companies. So I think there is a question here of pitching the market opportunity. And that's why I think, we shouldn't approach this as, oh, there's all these data and you need to report. No, you need to report what may give, companies need to report what gives a fair risk of their impacts, risks, and opportunities. Those need to be managed, and to manage, you have this set of tools, which many of them can be based on geospatial data. You know, it's true that, for example, I don't know, power companies, they could be starting monitoring and reporting their CO2 emissions based on geospatial data, and that could be a lot easier and provide a much more frequent reporting than these annual reports. But that type of reporting could make a lot of sense for facility-based reporting. But when you come to corporate reporting, don't forget that you have all these layers of deciding who reports on which asset and aggregating that information. And that, to a large extent, is a manual job. It's the job of accountants. Also defining what is the organization. We spent a lot of time defining what is the reporting organization, or as we call it, the reporting undertaking. So the thing that is really important to note here is that, and it's actually kind of what I like it also, is corporate reporting is in the interface of different disciplines, accounting, law, because a lot of it is also linked to regulation, engineering from the data side, and data science, and is loads of compromises. And it becomes a little bit of a Frankenstein, but it's because it has to respond to requirements from all these different places. But I would say pitch this as a tool that companies can use to manage.
Okay, thanks. Anthony, have you managed to get your microphone working?
I believe that Anthony is just reconnecting, so I think maybe now it will work.
Anthony? Doesn't sound as though it's worked, I'm afraid. No, we don't hear you. I know how frustrating this can be. Sorry, we'll move on. The following question was from Adriano Volpio, concerned about sort of reporting on actions and how that can be justified over a period of time. Adriano?
Yeah, thank you. I'm representing Planetech Italia. We deliver services for the private market based on the Earth observation data. My question was about the fact that, as you know, companies within the non-financial reports claim that they are going to do this and that based on their offsetting needs, for example, to compensate emissions, and then they make investments on the nature-based projects, for example, and they must report on that because they claim, for example, in year 2020, they're going to do that and achieve that results. Then they have to document year by year that they're doing this and how they're doing that. But in the end of the day, we see huge potential. Actually, we have verified that for Earth observation to be useful for that purpose in several, let's say, segments, not only nature-based, but also green investments based on infrastructure that you can monitor or see by satellites. But in the end of the day, the main issue is that they are not forced by any regulation to do that. I mean, Europe is investing on satellites. They keep on launching and launching. Now they have launched this biomass that can give us access to new data, more accurate data. But in the end, there's no regulation that, let's say, pushes private users to consider at least satellites. But that the chain is completely ready, is there. We have services to satisfy this, to use such data, and to help companies to do this in a more efficient way. But there's no pressure on using Earth observation as a, let's say, methodology or technology enabling and, say, improving such processes. I don't know why. We have inspected several companies within the private market and also identified the areas, the people in charge of doing this. But as for other markets, as long as there's no regulation saying, okay, maybe you can consider also this. I'm not saying forcing, but at least inviting people using this. Nobody will use that. So this is a consideration. But my question was, anyway, would EFRAG make additional efforts to help Earth observation being considered in this way?
In that way, how requiring companies to use certain or
methodologies like MRV, data-driven Earth observation, to, let's say, support such transparency you were talking about.
Reporting is data-driven, but it's a different type of data. And I'm sorry, but I think if maybe the community, if it is expecting regulation to solve your commercial problems, I think you are in the right, let's say, mode, because it seems you have great solutions, but you still don't have problems. And it should not be the regulation that creates those problems. You need to make sure that your solutions are adding value and pitching it itself to the market. Now, the reporting can help companies realizing that added value, realizing not only from the point of view of the many environmental people that are there and that say, oh, there's a solution for this problem that I'm trying to solve, but also from the, the financial perspective, because ultimately this affects the bottom line. But Yeah, this would be what I have to say on that. You need to see it the other way around. I'm sorry. At least that's my perspective. And the entire thing that we now actually have to do is simplify the requirements. And I can tell you that I think we can simplify reporting requirements, and yet the what this will drive in the companies may drive a certain demand for your solutions.
Yeah, I think it's we were saying earlier about raising awareness of what can be done, and certainly in other areas, work that we do shows that awareness is not always there. And when it is when the awareness is there, there are other barriers to the uptake: lack of technical competence, a lack of management support, and there are various barriers that need to be overcome. And I think, as you said earlier, if we can perhaps work together to try to identify and not promote, but identify the solutions that can be available, I think that could be a useful step.
We are very happy to give visibility to your solutions and how they can help. We would be very unhappy if, for example, you organize as a community and say, "Oh, you need to report on this, and that because we need to sell our products." That would be catastrophic.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I always say there that I don't want regulation on my industry sector, so why should I want it on other industry sectors? Of course, there are times when it is necessary. I'm thinking of water as being a good example there, where we've had a lot of problems in the UK with pollution from water sources, where it has not been given the attention it should have been. Wolfhard, as usual, very active in the chat. Come in and perhaps pose the most important question that you have.
Jeff, that's a good point. I think, first of all, most of the questions I had were already kind of discussed here. And just at the risk of repeating myself from earlier EOcafes, I think the real opportunity for us is to really go into the industries that have to report, talk to them at the very basic level, trying to identify what exactly is your problem, what exactly are the parameters, what are the metrics you have to follow, what are the parameters that you have to report on, and then design backwards and go in and show them that we can do it. As Flavia just said, yes, we do have a lot of technologies that we can throw at these. We basically have most of the data technologies to help with reporting, yet the industries really have to understand that we are not just, should I say, strange scientists going into business, trying to, as you just said, Pedro, looking for a problem with our solutions, but that we can actually produce tailored solutions for them to really solve their problems. If we go in, that builds the confidence, and that makes us a service provider. They just maybe, I shouldn't say blindly, but in the end, go to as a trusted entity. Like, okay, well, we have this reporting problem. Yeah, let's go to the EO industries. I think this is a big, there's a big niche and big opportunity. And what it needs really is a translator. But what I'm also afraid of is that we have a lot of different complexities within this reporting. It's pretty easy to report on air pollution that comes out of a smokestack. That's easy to detect and easy to quantify and report on. When it comes to the impact from not from agriculture or even worse, mining industries, tailings that destroy whole ecosystems, how do we actually find the parameters in our EO data? Now, how do we combine them? And this is what I would like to mention, is to go more for a combination, not only of data, but also of technologies, where we can combine EO with non-EO data, with even human observations, with even crowd science observations, and then model all that into a complex system. And last but not least, maybe Earth can be a platform for the individual specialists in our field to come together and design custom solutions. So it's more of a comment than a question I had.
Okay, thanks. Nicola has put in the chat a response about making voices heard during the omnibus debate. Can you perhaps say a bit more about that and how companies could respond in that respect, Nicholas? Or
I mean,
yeah.
On this side, it might be already a bit too late. We're already quite advanced in the process. But I think really there is a strong anti-ESG pushback at the moment. And really, like, we need other voices coming from actually services like yours showing, because from one side, basically, you have business associations saying it's impossible to get this information. We'll never be able to. And on the other side, what I'm hearing here is actually we already have like most of what we need, especially from my side for IFO. And so really, my point was really use whatever means to also make your voice heard, because at the moment it's really who screams the loudest. And it is like a really stupid political game. But really, if we want to save something that is decent at the CSRD level, we need all voices to be heard. And so this is where, like, on my side, I'm saying, like, yes, please make noise.
And is there a channel for doing that?
I mean, on our side, on EFRAG, we're going to have a public consultation over the summer, which I think could be a good way to like interact with us. But the best is to go directly to whoever is your representative, whoever you have connection, like, so at the Parliament, European Commission, and like whatever access you have, like to these politicians, I think, or even like what many civil societies actors are doing, for instance, in France, is open letters, like open letters. For instance, we have like the technology, we can do that. There are many ways basically to also lobby is a dirty word, but lobby from your side, I think.
Okay. For everyone else on the call, I didn't say Nicola works with Pedro in EFRAG, if that wasn't apparent. Okay. We're coming very close to the end of the time. I did notice a comment in there from Emmanuel about DGGS, and so maybe very quickly, Emmanuel, you can explain your thinking there, and if there's a question, then put that.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. DGGS is a way to model space, I would say. And it's super important when you have multi-scale approaches like statistics or weather. So that's why I was mentioning this in the case of weather forecast. And I'm wondering, that's why I asked the question, will it make sense to leverage DGGS within the environmental field? I'm convinced for weather, I'm convinced for statistics. I have not yet a position on the ESG. So if anyone among this round table is having experience on that, I'm interested in this.
Okay, thanks on that. So maybe I can broaden that into sort of a general last question, Pedro, in terms of is there something, or what can we do to take things forward from here? How can we develop stronger links in this respect, and best practices? What tools would be appropriate?
Well, I think until October is going to be difficult, just to be totally honest. But we would be very happy to, for example, if you want to think of a webinar that we can co-organize so that you show case studies, examples of things that help, with topics that companies have to report. We could write reports. I actually think when I was at CDP, I made a report with some companies providing geospatial solutions. and it was very well received at the time. We can, you can look into the reports that are published according to the CSRD, and from there identify use cases. We are also happy to, let's say, identify certain use cases, and if necessary, try to be brokers, see if in the corporate side they would be interested in having certain conversations and put them in contact with you. So be kind of facilitators of a dialogue.
Yeah.
So these are possible ways that we can work together.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, and hopefully we can find the means to work together on that respect in the future. And I hope that the conversation today has given people a better understanding of how ESG reporting works and how there may be opportunities there, and how maybe even to address those. I just mentioned Gwenelle, who has put some comments into the chat about cloud monitoring. So if you haven't seen that, then maybe that's useful. We haven't got time to go into that further, but we will continue the discussion if anyone is interested. So let me thank Pedro and Nicola for your contribution as well, but particularly Pedro for joining us today and talking in the EOcafe, and hopefully see all the audience next time. I don't know if we've got a slide of next time. That's for this time. 5th of June, yes. Where we're talking about wind. We're talking about Earth observation for wind. Pedro,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Okay, so turn the recording off. Anyone who wishes to comment, please feel free to do so. Just open your microphone.